I knew something was wrong the moment I noticed the door. I had lived in that house for over 20 years. Every creak
What
in the
exactly
floor,
is
every
behind this
shadow
locked
in the
door,
hallway,
dear?
I knew them
it's
all.
nothing. It is
But
just
that door,
storage.
it hadn't been there before. Not until a few weeks after my son Michael and his wife Jessica moved in. "Just storage," Jessica said quickly when I asked. Too quickly. And the way Michael wouldn't look me in the eyes, that's when something inside me turned cold. Because you don't hide a locked door in your own mother's house. Unless there's something you're afraid she'll find. If this story already has you feeling something, go ahead. And like the video, it really helps. And if you've ever had a moment where your own family made you question everything, I'd love for you to share it in the comments. Also, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is. I always read those. And if you want more stories like this, don't forget to subscribe. I never imagined I would feel like a guest in my own home. When Michael first suggested that he and Jessica move in with me, it sounded reasonable. Practical, even. "It'll be easier for all of us," he said, sitting across from me at the kitchen table I'd picked out myself 20 years ago. "You won't have to worry about being alone anymore." I remember looking at him, my son, my only child, and feeling a quiet sense of relief. After my husband passed, the house had felt too large, too quiet. Every room echoed with memories I didn't always have the strength to revisit. So I agreed. I sold my smaller vacation property, combined some of my savings, and let Michael help manage things. He insisted. Said it would take the burden off me. At the time, it felt like love. Now, I wasn't so sure. The first few weeks after they moved in felt almost like a second chance at family life. Jessica cooked dinner most nights, nothing fancy, but warm and filling. Michael would sit across from me talking about work, about bills, about responsibilities. It all sounded very adult, very reassuring. And Lily, my sweet granddaughter, she was the light in all of it. She would come into my room in the evening sometimes with a book, sometimes just to sit beside me. She'd rest her head on my shoulder the way she used to when she was little. "Grandma," she'd whisper, "this is still your house, right?" I used to smile when she asked that. "Yes, sweetheart," I'd tell her. "Of course it is. But lately..." I hesitated before answering, because something had shifted. It wasn't one big moment. It was 100 small ones. Jessica started organizing things. At first, it was helpful labeling cabinets, rearranging the pantry, but then it became controlling. My things began to disappear. Old photo albums I kept in the living room cabinet were suddenly boxed up for safekeeping. My favorite coffee mugs were replaced with matching sets she preferred. "It just looks cleaner," she said one morning when I asked. Cleaner? That word stayed with me longer than it should have. Michael changed too. He used to ask me before making decisions about the house. Now he told me. Or worse, he didn't mention things at all until they were already done. One afternoon, I came home from a short walk to find a new lock installed on the back door. "Oh, we upgraded the security," Michael said casually, barely glancing up from his phone. "We. Not you, not me. We." I stood there for a moment, keys still in my hand, feeling like I had missed something important. Like a conversation everyone else had been part of, except me. "Do I have a key?" I asked. Jessica smiled too quickly. "Of course. I'll get it for you." She disappeared down the hallway, and I remember noticing how she walked faster than usual, like she didn't want me following her. That was the first time I felt it. That quiet, creeping feeling that something wasn't right. Then there were the whispers. Late at night when I couldn't sleep, I'd hear their voices through the walls. Low, urgent, just out of reach of understanding. Sometimes I caught fragments. "Not yet. She doesn't know." Papers. Every time I stepped into the hallway, the voices would stop. Doors would close. Silence would settle like a heavy blanket over the house. And then there was the door. It appeared sometime after they moved in. Not overnight, but close enough that I couldn't remember exactly when it had been added. It was at the end of the hallway, near what used to be a storage space. I had always kept old boxes there, holiday decorations, my husband's tools, things I couldn't quite let go of. Now there was a solid wooden door in its place. Locked. Always locked. The first time I tried the handle, it didn't budge. "Michael," I called out. "What's this door for?" He came down the hallway, wiping his hands on a towel like I had interrupted something. "Oh, that just extra storage," he said quickly. "For what? Just stuff. You know, our things, our things." That word again. "Can I see?" I asked. Jessica appeared behind him almost immediately, like she had been listening. "It's really messy in there right now," she said with a polite smile. "We're still organizing." Her eyes didn't match her smile, and Michael, he wouldn't look at me. That's when the feeling in my chest turned from unease into something colder, something sharper. Because I've lived long enough to recognize when people are hiding something. And I've raised a son long enough to know when he's lying. Still, I told myself I was overreacting. That's what people do when they don't want to face the truth. We make excuses. We soften edges. We convince ourselves that discomfort is just imagination. But the signs kept coming. One morning, I tried to check my bank account. I had always handled my finances carefully. Even after my husband passed, I made sure everything was in order. I knew exactly what I had, where it was, and why. But that morning, something was different. I couldn't log in. I tried again and again. Then a message popped up. "Access restricted. Please contact account administrator." Account administrator. My heart skipped. I walked into the kitchen where Jessica was making coffee. "Jessica," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "do you know anything about my bank account being locked?" She didn't turn around right away. Just for a second, just 1 second, I saw her shoulders stiffen. Then she smiled and handed me a cup. "Oh, that," she said lightly. "Michael set up some protections. You know, just in case. These things happen all the time now." Protections. Without telling me, I looked at her, really looked at her. And for the first time since she became part of this family, I didn't see warmth. I saw calculation. I saw someone who had already made decisions about my life, without me. And in that moment, standing in my own kitchen, holding a cup, I didn't choose in a house that didn't feel like mine anymore. I realized something I wasn't ready to admit before. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. This wasn't just overprotection. Something was being taken from me. Slowly, carefully, piece by piece. And whatever was behind that locked door, I had a feeling it was the one place they never expected me to see. Once you start noticing something is wrong, you can't unsee it. That's the hardest part. It's not the moment of discovery. It's everything that comes after the quiet confirmations, the little details that suddenly make sense in ways you wish they didn't. After that morning with my bank account, I began paying attention. Not casually, carefully. The kind of attention you give when your instincts are whispering something you're not ready to hear out loud. Jessica stopped asking me anything about money altogether. Before, she would at least pretend, "Do you want me to pay this bill? Or should we transfer this amount?" Now she simply acted. Bills were paid, accounts were handled, and I was no longer part of the conversation. One afternoon, I sat at the dining table with a stack of old mail I had managed to keep hidden in my room. Most of it was junk, but every now and then there was something important, a statement, a notice, something that hadn't been redirected yet. That's when I saw it. A letter from the bank, addressed to me, but opened. My fingers trembled slightly as I unfolded it. The crease was fresh, not the kind that happens accidentally. Someone had read this before me. "We are confirming recent changes to account authorization." I stopped reading. Authorization. My chest tightened. I scanned the page again, slower this time. There it was, Michael's name listed under authorized access. Not just viewing rights. Full access. I don't remember agreeing to that. I would remember something like that. Wouldn't I? For a moment, just a moment, I felt that dangerous flicker of doubt. Maybe I had signed something. Maybe it was during my hospital stay last year. Maybe I had trusted him too easily. But then another thought pushed through sharper and clearer. Even if I had agreed, why wasn't I told? Why was it done quietly? Why did it feel like something was being taken instead of shared? I folded the letter carefully and slipped it back into the envelope. Then I placed it inside my drawer, the one place Jessica hadn't started organizing yet. That drawer became my secret, because if they were hiding things from me, then I needed to start keeping things from them. That evening, I watched them more closely than ever. Michael sat on the couch scrolling through his phone, barely acknowledging me when I walked into the room. Jessica was in the kitchen, moving with that same efficient precision, like everything she did had already been planned hours in advance. "Dinner's ready," she called out. We sat together like we always did, but something had changed. Or maybe it had been changing for a while, and I was only just seeing it clearly now. "Mom," Michael said suddenly, not looking up from his plate. "You should probably let us handle the finances completely from now on." I froze. "I already do," I said, slowly. He shrugged. "Yeah, but I mean, officially. It's safer that way." Safer. That word again, for who I asked quietly. He finally looked at me, and there it was. That flicker, that brief, almost invisible hesitation before he answered. "For you," he said. Jessica placed a hand lightly on his arm. "We're just trying to help Sylvia. You've been through a lot. It's normal to need support." Support. They kept dressing it up in kind words, but it didn't feel kind. It felt controlled. "I've managed my finances my entire life," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I don't see why that needs to change now." Jessica's smile tightened just a little. "It's not about need," she said. "It's about protection." "Protection from what?" "From whom?" I didn't say it out loud, but I felt it, and I knew they felt it too. Because the conversation ended there. Not resolved, not explained, just cut off. Later that night, I couldn't sleep again. The house was quiet, but not peaceful. There's a difference. Peace feels calm. This felt watchful, like the walls themselves were listening. I got out of bed and stepped into the hallway, careful not to make too much noise. The floor creaked beneath my feet just like it always had, but now every sound felt louder, more dangerous. I moved slowly toward the kitchen, intending to get a glass of water. That's when I heard it. Voices. Low, urgent, coming from the living room. I stopped. We need to finish this before she starts asking more questions. Jessica. She already noticed the account. Michael. My heart began to pound. "Then we move to the next step," Jessica said. "The sooner the better. Next step." I pressed my hand against the wall, steadying myself. "What about the room?" Michael asked. Room. The door. She hasn't gotten in, has she? Jessica replied sharply. No, he said quickly. It's locked. Locked. Always locked. Good, Jessica said. Everything we need is in there. Once the paperwork is finalized, it won't matter what she thinks. Paperwork. Finalized. It won't matter. The words echoed in my mind, each one heavier than the last. Because now, it wasn't just suspicion. It was confirmation. They were doing something. Something deliberate. Something planned. And whatever it was almost finished. I stepped back slowly, my breath shallow, careful not to make a sound. For the first time in my life, I felt afraid in my own home. Not of strangers, not of the dark, but of the people I had trusted the most. I returned to my room and closed the door quietly behind me. Then I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at my hands. They were shaking, not from weakness, from realization. Because now I knew two things for certain. First, my family was hiding something from me. And second, whatever was behind that locked door was the key to everything they didn't want me to find. The next morning, I woke up with a strange clarity. Fear was still there, but it had changed shape. It wasn't paralyzing anymore. It was guiding. When you reach a certain age, you learn something important. Instincts don't come from nowhere. They come from experience, from years of seeing patterns, of recognizing what doesn't feel right, even when you can't explain why. And right now, every instinct I had was telling me one thing. I needed to stop asking questions and start finding answers. I moved through the house like I always did that morning, slowly, predictably. I made my coffee, sat at the kitchen table, flipped through an old magazine I wasn't really reading. Jessica watched me from across the counter. Not openly, but enough. You didn't sleep well, she asked, her tone light, almost casual. I looked up and smiled faintly. I suppose not. You should try to rest more, she said. Stress isn't good at your age. At your age. There it was again. That quiet way of reminding me I was less capable, less aware, less in control. I nodded politely, but inside something hardened, because now I understood. This wasn't just about money. This was about power. Later that afternoon, Michael and Jessica left the house together. Something about errands, groceries, appointments. The details didn't matter. What mattered was that they were gone. And for the first time in weeks, the house felt like mine again. I stood in the hallway for a long moment, staring at that door. The one at the end. The one they didn't want me near. My heart began to beat faster, not out of fear this time, but anticipation. Because this was my chance. I walked toward it slowly, my footsteps echoing softly against the hardwood floor. The closer I got, the heavier the air felt, like the space itself was holding its breath. I reached out and touched the handle. Cold, unmoving, locked just like always. I leaned in slightly, pressing my ear against the door. Nothing, no sound, just silence. But silence can hide a lot. I stepped back and looked around the hallway, scanning for anything that might help. A key, a clue, something I had missed before. That's when I noticed it. A small scratch near the edge of the doorframe, barely visible. Like something had been inserted there, over and over again. A key. Of course, They had to be keeping it somewhere. The question was, where? I turned slowly, letting my eyes move across the hallway, the nearby shelves, the small table against the wall. Everything looked ordinary. Too ordinary. Because people who hide things often make the mistake of hiding them close enough to feel convenient, far enough to feel safe. I walked into the living room, my gaze drifting over the furniture, the couch, the side tables, the bookshelf Jessica had rearranged 3 times since moving in. That's when I saw it. A small decorative box on the shelf. New. I was certain of it. It hadn't been there before. I picked it up carefully, my fingers brushing over its smooth surface. It was light, too light to hold anything heavy, but when I opened it, there it was. A single key. Small. Simple, but unmistakably real. My breath caught in my throat. For a moment, I just stood there staring at it. Because this changed everything. This wasn't just suspicion anymore. This was proof. They had locked something away, something they didn't want me to see. And now, I had the means to see it. I closed the box slowly and placed it back exactly where I found it. Every detail mattered now. Every movement had to look untouched. Then I walked back into the hallway, the key hidden in my hand. My pulse was louder now. Faster. Not from fear, from knowing I was about to cross a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Once I opened that door, there would be no going back to pretending everything was fine. I stood in front of it again, the key resting in my palm. Just storage, Jessica had said. I almost laughed, because we both knew that wasn't true. I inserted the key into the lock. It fit perfectly. Of course it did. I turned it slowly. Click. The sound echoed in the quiet hallway, louder than it should have been. For a split second, I froze, waiting, listening. But the house remained still. They weren't home. No one was coming. It was just me, and whatever was on the other side of this door. I wrapped my fingers around the handle and hesitated. Not because I was afraid of what I might find, but because I already knew. It wouldn't be good. I took a deep breath and opened the door. The smell hit me first. Paper, dust, something stale like a room that had been closed for too long. I stepped inside slowly, my eyes adjusting to the dim light filtering through a small window. At first glance, it looked exactly like they had said. Storage, boxes stacked against the walls, shelves filled with files, a desk in the corner. Ordinary, almost convincing. But then I saw it. The files, neatly organized, labeled. Not random storage at all. This was intentional, carefully arranged, carefully hidden. I moved closer, my fingers trembling as I reached for the nearest folder. My name was on it, Sylvia Bennett. The air left my lungs. Slowly, I opened it. Inside were documents, official ones, bank statements, legal forms, copies of signatures, my signature, over and over again, on documents I had never seen, never signed, never agreed to. My vision blurred for a moment as the realization hit me. This wasn't just control. This wasn't just manipulation. This was something much worse, because this was fraud. And they had been doing it right under my roof. I turned another page, then another, each one worse than the last. Transfers, authorizations, changes to ownership. My hands began to shake again, but this time, not from fear, from anger, deep, cold, unshakable anger, because now I understood everything. The whispers, the locked door, the bank account. It was all connected, all part of something they thought I would never discover. I stood there in that hidden room surrounded by the evidence of their betrayal. And for the first time since this all began, I wasn't confused anymore. I wasn't uncertain. I wasn't afraid. I was awake, and I knew exactly what they were trying to take from me. The only question now was how far they had already gone. I don't remember how long I stood there. It could have been seconds. It could have been minutes. Time has a strange way of slipping when your entire reality begins to rearrange itself in front of you. My name stared back at me from every page. Sylvia Bennett, typed neatly, printed professionally, signed. In a handwriting that looked so much like mine it almost made me question myself again. Almost, but not quite. Because there were things you don't forget. The way your hand moves when you sign your name, the slight curve in the S, the pressure you apply at the end of Bennett. These signatures, they weren't mine. They were practiced, copied, forged. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to keep going. If I stopped now, I would lose my nerve. And I couldn't afford that anymore. Not after everything I had just seen. I moved to the desk in the corner of the room and began sorting through the folders more carefully. They weren't random at all, each one labeled with dates, categories, and names. Bank transfers, property documents, authorization forms. Every piece of my life. Documented and controlled without my knowledge. Then I found it. A thick folder labeled simply property transfer, primary residence. My breath caught. Primary residence. This house. My house. I opened it slowly, my fingers suddenly cold. Inside were legal documents, real ones, not copies, not drafts, official filings. And there on the first page was something that made my stomach drop. A transfer of ownership from me to Michael Bennett. No, I whispered under my breath. The word felt small, insufficient, because what I was looking at, it wasn't just betrayal. It was theft, calculated, planned, and executed with precision. My eyes scanned the document, searching for something, anything that might explain it away. A condition, a clause, a reason. But there was nothing, just my name, his name, and a signature that wasn't mine. My knees felt weak, and I had to sit down in the chair behind me, because now I understood something I hadn't wanted to admit before. They weren't just trying to control my finances, they were trying to take everything, the house, the accounts, my independence, my life, and they had almost succeeded. I turned the page, my hands shaking harder now. There were more documents, plans, timelines, notes written in Jessica's handwriting. Finalized transfer before end of month. Move remaining funds after authorization confirmed. Next step, care arrangement. Care arrangement. The words sent a chill through me. I flipped to the next page, and there it was. A brochure, a nursing home. My vision blurred as I stared at it. They had already chosen the place, already discussed it, already planned it. For me. Without ever asking, without ever telling me. I pressed my hand against my mouth, trying to hold back the wave of emotion rising inside me. Because this wasn't just about money. This was about erasing me. Slowly, quietly, legally. until I had nothing left to fight with. And then they would put me somewhere I couldn't interfere, somewhere I couldn't ask questions, somewhere I couldn't stop them. Tears filled my eyes, but they didn't fall. Not yet. Because beneath the hurt, beneath the disbelief, something else was growing. Something stronger. Anger. The kind that doesn't explode. The kind that settles deep in your bones and waits for the right moment. I closed the folder slowly, my mind racing. They thought I didn't know. They thought I was confused, forgetful, easy to manage. And that was their biggest mistake. Because they had underestimated me. They had forgotten who I was before I became mom, before I became grandma, before I became convenient. I had built this life, every dollar, every decision, every sacrifice, and I wasn't about to let it be taken from me without a fight. I stood up slowly, my body still trembling, but my mind clearer than it had been in weeks. I looked around the room one more time, taking in every detail, every file, every piece of evidence. Because this room, this hidden room, was no longer just their secret. It was my advantage. Carefully, I began putting everything back exactly where I found it. The folders, the papers, the key. Nothing could be out of place. Because if they suspected I knew, they would move faster. And I needed time. Time to think. Time to plan. Time to turn this around. I stepped out of the room and closed the door quietly behind me. The click of the lock sounded different now. Not like something keeping me out, but like something I had already conquered. I returned the key to the small, decorative box in the living room, placing it exactly as it had been before. Then I sat down on the couch, my hands folded neatly in my lap, waiting, because I knew they would be back soon. And when they walked through that door, I would have to look them in the eyes, smile, pretend, just like they had been doing to me. The thought should have made me uneasy, but it didn't, because now I understood the game. And for the first time since this all began, I wasn't the one being played. I was the one preparing to win. That evening, when Michael and Jessica walked back through the front door, I was ready. Not emotionally. No. That part was still raw, still aching in ways I didn't have words for. But mentally, I was sharper than I had been in years. I sat in my usual spot on the couch, a book open in my lap, my reading glasses resting low on my nose. From the outside, I looked exactly the same. Calm, predictable, unaware. "Hey, Mom," Michael called out, dropping his keys into the bowl by the door. "Hi, sweetheart," I replied, my voice steady, even warm. Jessica stepped in behind him carrying grocery bags. "We picked up your favorite tea," she said with a small smile. I looked up and returned the gesture. "That's thoughtful of you." And it was. That was the confusing part. Even now, even after everything I had seen, they could still act like this. Kind, normal, as if nothing was wrong, as if they hadn't already rewritten my life behind my back. Michael walked into the kitchen unpacking groceries while Jessica joined me in the living room. "You look better today," she said, sitting down across from me. "I feel better," I replied. That wasn't entirely a lie. There's something about knowing the truth, even a painful truth, that gives you a strange kind of strength. "Good," she said. "We were a little worried." Worried. I studied her face carefully. Her expression was soft concerned, convincing, but now that I knew what to look for, I could see it. The calculation behind her eyes. The way she measured every word, every reaction. I appreciate that, I said gently. And for a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence stretched between us, thin and fragile. Then Michael returned, wiping his hands on a dish towel. "Mom," he said, leaning against the counter. "We should probably talk about something." There it was. I felt my heart beat once hard, but my expression didn't change. "Of course," I said. Jessica straightened slightly in her seat, her posture more alert now. "This is about your finances," Michael continued. "We think it's time to make things more official." Official? The word hung in the air. "And what does that mean?" I asked calmly. He exchanged a quick glance with Jessica. "Just a second, but I saw it. The silent communication, the agreement." "It just means," Jessica said smoothly, "that we take full responsibility, legally. It'll make everything easier, safer for you." Safer. I almost smiled, because now I knew exactly what safer meant. "It sounds like you've already made some decisions," I said. Michael shifted slightly. "We're just trying to help Mom." "By taking control of everything?" I asked softly. His jaw tightened. "It's not like that, isn't it?" I wanted to say it. I wanted to pull out those documents, throw them on the table, demand answers, demand explanations. But I didn't, because that would be their game. Confrontation without preparation, emotion without strategy. And I was done playing by their rules. "I've managed my life just fine until now," I said instead. "I'm not sure why that needs to change all of a sudden." Jessica leaned forward slightly, her tone more persuasive now. "Sylvia, this isn't about taking anything from you. It's about protecting what you have." "Protecting? From what?" "From me." I held her gaze, letting the silence stretch just long enough to make her uncomfortable. Then I nodded slowly. "I understand," I said. Michael blinked, surprised. "You do?" "Yes," I said. "I understand that you think you're helping." "Think?" The word was subtle, but deliberate. Jessica smiled again, relieved. "That's all we want. I just need a little time," I added, "to think about everything." Michael hesitated. I could see it in his eyes. He wanted me to agree immediately, to sign whatever papers they had prepared, to make it easy. But I didn't, and that unsettled him. "Of course," he said finally. "Take your time." Time. That was exactly what I needed, because now that I knew what they were doing, I could start planning my next move. Dinner that night felt like a performance. Every word carefully chosen. Every gesture controlled. We talked about small things, Lily's school, the weather, a new restaurant opening downtown. Normal conversation. But beneath it, there was tension. Invisible. Constant. Watching. Waiting. At one point, Lily looked at me from across the table, her eyes searching mine. She didn't say anything, but I could tell. She felt it too. Children always do. They sense what adults try to hide. Later, as I stood at the sink washing dishes, Jessica approached me quietly. "You handled that well," she said. I paused, my hands still in the water. "Handled what I asked." The conversation, she replied. "Some people would overreact." "Overreact?" I turned slowly, meeting her gaze. "Maybe some people would," I said. Her smile flickered for just a second, then returned. "Well," she said lightly, We're all on the same side here. No, we weren't. But I didn't say it. Because the truth is, she didn't believe that either. That night, as I lay in bed, I stared at the ceiling, my mind racing. I had the evidence. I had seen the truth. But that wasn't enough. Not yet. Because if I made a move too soon, they would cover their tracks. They would deny everything. And I would be left with nothing. No, I needed to be smarter than that. Stronger. More patient. I turned onto my side, the darkness of the room wrapping around me. And for the first time in weeks, I wasn't afraid. Not of them. Not of what they were planning. Because now I had something they didn't expect. Awareness. And once you see the truth, you can't be controlled by lies anymore. The game had changed. And they didn't even know it yet. The next step wasn't about confrontation. It was about confirmation. Because as certain as I felt, I needed something more than what I had seen. Not for myself, for what came next. The following morning, I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I left the house without telling anyone, not out of rebellion, out of necessity. I'm going for a walk, I called out casually as I slipped on my coat. Jessica glanced up from the kitchen. Do you want me to come with you? There was a pause, just long enough for me to feel it. That subtle shift again. That need to monitor, to stay close, to keep me within reach. No, I said gently. I think I'd like some fresh air on my own. She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. Of course. Michael didn't even look up. Be careful, he muttered. Careful. I almost laughed as I stepped outside, because for the first time in weeks, I was. The air felt different that morning, cooler, sharper. Or maybe that was just me. When you finally see the truth, the world doesn't change. You do. I didn't go far, just far enough. Then I turned the corner and headed somewhere I hadn't been in years. The bank. As I walked through the glass doors, I felt a strange mix of nerves and determination settle inside me. This place used to feel routine. Now it felt like a battlefield. A young woman greeted me at the front desk, but I barely registered her words. I'd like to speak with someone about my account, I said calmly. She nodded and led me to a small office. A few minutes later, a familiar face stepped in. Karen Whitmore. I hadn't seen her in years, but I recognized her instantly. Sylvia, she said, surprised. It's been a while, it has, I replied, offering a small smile. I wish this were just a social visit. Her expression shifted immediately. Concern. Professional, but genuine. What's going on? I took a seat across from her, folding my hands in my lap. I need you to tell me something, I said quietly, and I need you to be honest. She nodded. Of course. I took a breath. Who has access to my accounts? There was a brief pause, not hesitation. Verification. Karen turned to her computer, typing quickly, her eyes scanning the screen. Then she stopped and looked back at me. Sylvia, when did you authorize Michael as a full account holder? The words landed exactly as I expected. Still, they hurt. I didn't, I said. Her expression tightened. That's not what I'm seeing here. I know, I replied. That's why I'm here. Karen leaned back slightly, studying me more carefully now. Are you saying these authorizations weren't done by you? I held her gaze. Yes. Silence filled the room. Not awkward, not uncertain, heavy, because we both understood what that meant. Karen exhaled slowly. Sylvia, there have been multiple changes over the past few months. Access levels, transfer permissions, even partial ownership documentation. Ownership. The word echoed in my mind. How much I asked. She hesitated again. This time, it wasn't procedural. It was personal. A significant amount, she said carefully. Several large transfers have already been initiated. Initiated, not completed, a small detail, but an important one. Can they be stopped? I asked. Karen's fingers hovered over the keyboard. Yes, she said finally, but only if we act quickly. Quickly. I nodded. Then we need to act. She looked at me for a long moment, then leaned forward. Sylvia, I need to ask you something. Go ahead. Are you safe? The question caught me off guard, not because it was unexpected, because it was real. I thought about it for a moment, about the house, about the whispers, about the plans I had uncovered. Then I answered honestly. I am now. Karen nodded slowly. All right, she said. Then let's fix this. The next hour passed in a blur of paperwork, confirmations, and quiet urgency. Karen explained everything carefully, but I only needed the essentials. We revoked access. We froze transfers. We flagged the account. Each step felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. Piece by piece, control returned. Not completely, not yet, but enough. When it was done, Karen looked at me with something like admiration. You handled this well, she said. I shook my head slightly. No, I replied. I just realized what was happening before it was too late. She nodded. Most people don't. I stood up slowly, smoothing my coat. Thank you, Karen. Of course, she said. And Sylvia. I paused at the door. If there's anything else, anything at all you need, don't wait. I gave her a small smile. I won't. As I stepped back outside, the world felt different again. Not lighter, but clearer. Because now I knew something else. They hadn't finished. Their plan wasn't complete, which meant I still had time. Time to prepare. Time to gather everything I needed. Time to make sure that when the truth came out, it wouldn't just hurt them. It would stop them completely. I walked home slowly, my thoughts steady, focused, because the game had changed again. And this time, I was no longer reacting. I was moving first. When I walked back into the house, nothing looked different. That was the unsettling part. The same couch, the same kitchen, the same quiet hum of a life that from the outside appeared completely normal. But I wasn't the same woman who had walked out that door an hour earlier, and that changed everything. Jessica was in the kitchen when I entered, wiping down the counter with slow, deliberate movements. You're back, she said without turning around. I am, I replied, setting my purse down gently. How was your walk? Refreshing. That wasn't a lie. Because clarity can feel like fresh air, even when it comes with pain. Michael's voice came from the living room. Mom, can you come here for a second? I paused, then walked in. He was sitting on the couch, a folder resting on the coffee table in front of him. My stomach tightened. So this was it. They were moving forward, faster than I expected. Sit down, he said. I did, slowly, carefully, like I was stepping into something I already understood, but needed to see through. Jessica joined us, sitting beside him. The two of them looked prepared, united. like they had rehearsed this moment. Michael slid the folder toward me. "We've been thinking about what's best for you," he began. Best. That word again. "And we've decided it's time to make things official." I looked down at the folder. Didn't open it. Not yet. "Official, how?" I asked. Jessica smiled softly. "Just some paperwork. Nothing complicated. It'll give us the legal authority to manage everything properly." Authority. There it was. The truth hidden in plain sight. I reached out and opened the folder. Inside were documents, neatly arranged, carefully prepared, and exactly what I expected. Power of attorney, property confirmation, financial authorization, all ready for my signature. All ready to finalize what they had already started. I flipped through the pages slowly, letting the silence stretch. Letting them wait. Because now, I was the one in control of the moment. "You've put a lot of work into this," I said quietly. Michael nodded. "We just want to make sure everything is taken care of." Taken care of. I looked up at him, really looked at him, at the son I had raised, the boy who used to hold my hand when crossing the street, the man who now sat in front of me, asking me to sign away my life. "Did you think I wouldn't notice I asked?" The words slipped out before I could stop them. Or maybe I didn't want to stop them. The room went still. Jessica's smile faded just slightly. "What do you mean?" she asked. I closed the folder gently and placed it back on the table. Then I leaned back, folding my hands in my lap. "I mean," I said slowly, "did you really think I wouldn't see what you've been doing?" Michael's expression hardened. "I don't know what you're talking about." Of course he didn't. That was part of the plan. Deny, deflect, control. But I wasn't that woman anymore. "The bank account," I said. "The access changes. The transfers." Jessica's eyes flickered. Just for a second. But it was enough. "That was for your protection," she said quickly. "No," I replied calmly. "It wasn't." Michael leaned forward, his tone sharper now. "Mom, you're overthinking this." Overthinking, another word they like to use. A way of turning clarity into confusion. "I went to the bank today," I said. That changed everything. The tension in the room shifted instantly. Jessica sat up straighter. Michael's jaw tightened. "You what?" he asked. "I spoke to Karen," I continued. "She showed me everything." Silence, heavy, unavoidable. And in that silence, I saw it. The truth they couldn't hide anymore. Fear. Not for me. For themselves. "You had no right to do that," Michael said finally. No right. The irony almost made me smile. "This is my account," I said. "My house. My life. I have every right." Jessica tried to recover first. "Sylvia," she said, her voice softer now, more careful. "We can explain. I'm sure you can," I interrupted gently. "But I've already seen enough." Michael stood up abruptly, pacing a few steps across the room. "You don't understand how complicated things are," he said. "We were trying to help you." "By forging my signature?" I asked. The word hit like a crack in the air. Jessica froze. Michael stopped walking. Because there it was, the line they couldn't step back from. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Jessica exhaled slowly. "It wasn't like that," she said. I tilted my head slightly. "Then how was it?" She hesitated, and that hesitation told me everything. Because when the truth is on your side, you don't hesitate. You speak. You explain. You stand firm. But when it isn't, you search for something, anything that might sound believable. "We were going to tell you," she said, finally. "When, after everything was gone, after I was moved out of my own home, after I was no longer a problem, I didn't ask those questions. Because I already knew the answers." "I don't think you were," I said quietly. Michael ran a hand through his hair, frustration written all over his face. "This is getting out of hand," he muttered. "No, it wasn't, for the first time." It was exactly where it needed to be. I stood up slowly, my movements calm, deliberate. "I'm not signing anything I said." The words were simple, clear, final. Jessica's expression tightened. "You need to think about this carefully," she said. "I have," I replied. Michael turned toward me, his voice rising. "You're making a mistake." I met his gaze without flinching. "No," I said. "You did." The silence that followed was different this time. Not tense, not uncertain, resolved, because something had shifted. Not just in the room, but in me. I wasn't reacting anymore. I wasn't guessing. I wasn't afraid. I knew the truth. And now, so did they. The moment the truth is spoken out loud, everything changes. There's no pretending after that. No going back to polite smiles and quiet dinners where everyone avoids what's really happening. That illusion had shattered. And now we were standing in the pieces. Michael was the first to move. He let out a short, sharp breath and ran both hands through his hair, pacing the room like a man trying to outrun something that was already catching up to him. "This is ridiculous," he said, his voice rising. "You're blowing this completely out of proportion." "Out of proportion." I remained standing, my posture steady, my voice calm. "No," I said quietly. "I'm finally seeing it clearly." Jessica didn't speak right away. She was watching me, studying me, trying to understand how much I knew and how much I didn't. That was her mistake. She still thought this was a situation she could manage. Control, redirect. "Sylvia," she said carefully, "you need to listen for a second." "I've been listening," I interrupted. "For weeks." The room fell silent again, because that was the truth they couldn't argue with. I had been listening, watching, putting the pieces together while they thought I was unaware. "You went behind our backs," Michael snapped. The accusation almost caught me off guard. "Behind your backs," I let out a small, disbelieving breath. "This is my life," I said. "There are no backs to go behind." Jessica stood up slowly, her composure beginning to crack. "We were trying to help you," she insisted. "You're not in a position to handle everything on your own anymore." There it was again, the narrative, the justification, the way they had reframed everything to make themselves feel right, and who decided that I asked. She hesitated. Michael answered. "We did." The honesty of it surprised me, not because it was unexpected, but because he said it without realizing what it revealed. "You decided," I repeated, "without me." "You wouldn't have agreed," he said quickly. "Of course I wouldn't have, because what they were doing wasn't help, it was control. And they knew it. So instead I said you forged my signature." Michael's face tightened. Jessica looked away. No denial this time, just silence. "And sometimes," Silence says more than words ever could. You don't understand how hard things have been, Michael said suddenly, his tone shifting. From defensive to desperate. I've been carrying everything, he continued. Bills, responsibilities, stress. You have no idea what it's like. I stared at him, really stared, because in that moment, I saw it. Not just the betrayal, but the justification behind it. He believed this. He believed that what he had done was somehow earned. You think that gives you the right to take everything from me? I asked. I wasn't taking it, he shot back. I was managing it. For yourself, I said. His silence was answer enough. Jessica stepped in again, her voice softer now. We weren't going to leave you with nothing, she said. You would have been taken care of. Taken care of? That phrase again. It sounded gentle, almost kind, until you understood what it really meant. You chose a nursing home, I said. That landed harder than anything else. Michael froze. Jessica's eyes widened. Because they hadn't expected that. They hadn't expected me to know that part. How? She began. I saw everything I said, every file, every note, every plan. The room felt smaller now, tighter, like the walls themselves were closing in around us. You went into that room, Michael said slowly. It wasn't a question. It was a realization. Yes, I replied. His expression darkened. You had no right. Stop, I said firmly. The word cut through the tension like a blade, and for the first time, he did. You don't get to talk about rights, I continued. Not after what you've done. Silence. Heavy. Unavoidable. Because there was nothing left to hide behind. No more excuses. No more carefully crafted explanations. Just the truth. Raw and exposed. Lily appeared in the doorway then. I hadn't even noticed her come in. She stood there quietly, her eyes wide, her face pale. How long has she been there? I wondered. How much had she heard Grandma? She whispered. My heart tightened, because out of everyone in that house, she was the only one who hadn't been part of this. The only one who was still innocent. It's okay, sweetheart, I said gently. But it wasn't. Not really. Nothing about this was okay. Lily looked between her parents and me, confusion and fear written all over her face. What's going on? She asked. Jessica moved toward her quickly. Nothing you need to worry about, she said. But Lily didn't move, didn't look away. Because children, they know when something is wrong. Even when adults try to hide it. It doesn't feel like nothing, she said quietly. The room went still again. Because she had said the one thing none of us could deny. Michael exhaled sharply, turning away. This isn't the time for this, he muttered. No, it was exactly the time. Because the truth doesn't wait for convenience. It doesn't adjust itself to make things easier. It comes out when it has to, and once it does, everything changes. I looked at my son one more time, at the man who had chosen this path, and I realized something important. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a mistake. This was a decision, a series of decisions, made over time, carried out deliberately, and now, he was facing the consequences. I'm not signing anything I said again. My voice was calm, but final. And this isn't over. Because it wasn't, not even close. This was just the beginning. There's a moment right after the truth comes out when everything feels suspended, like the world is holding its breath, waiting to see what happens next. That was where we were now, standing in the aftermath of something none of us could take back. Michael had stopped pacing. Jessica had stopped trying to explain. Even Lily had gone quiet, her small presence lingering in the doorway, like a witness who didn't yet understand the full weight of what she had just seen. And me, I felt steady. Not calm, not at peace, but grounded. Because the confusion was gone. The doubt was gone. All that remained was clarity. And clarity, even when it hurts, is powerful. Michael was the first to break the silence again. "What do you want?" he asked. The question was blunt, stripped of pretense, and finally, honest. I looked at him for a long moment before answering. "I want the truth," I said. "You already think you know it," he replied. "No," I said quietly. "I know it. What I want is to hear it from you." Jessica shifted beside him, her fingers tightening together. Michael let out a slow breath, then sat down heavily on the couch. For the first time since this began, he looked tired. Not angry, not defensive, just tired. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this," he said. There it was. Not a denial, not a rejection, an admission. Jessica glanced at him sharply, but he didn't look at her. He was looking at me. "It started small," he continued. "Just helping with bills, keeping things organized." "That's not what I saw," I said. "I know," he replied quickly. "I know. It got bigger." "Of course it did. Things like this always do." "They kept coming," he said. "Expenses, pressure. And I thought if I could just get control of everything, it would fix things." Control. That word again. Only now, it wasn't hidden behind polite language. It was exposed. Raw. "You thought taking my house would fix things?" I asked. His jaw tightened. "I wasn't taking it," he said again. "Yes," I replied. "You were." Jessica stood up abruptly. "This isn't fair," she said. "You're acting like we're criminals." I looked at her, not angrily, not emotionally, just clearly. "You forged legal documents," I said. "You transferred assets without consent. You planned to move me into a nursing home without telling me." Each word landed heavier than the last. "That's not a misunderstanding," I continued. "That's a crime." The word hung in the air. Crime. Jessica's face paled slightly. Michael looked away. "Because now..." They couldn't hide from what this really was. "We were going to take care of you," Jessica said again, but her voice was weaker now. "I never asked for that kind of care," I replied. "You needed it," she insisted. "No," I said firmly. "You needed it." That stopped her. Because it was true. This wasn't about my needs. It was about theirs, their control, their convenience, their justification. Michael leaned forward, his voice quieter now. "What happens next?" he asked. It was a different tone, not demanding, not defensive, almost uncertain. I took a breath, because this was the moment everything shifted again. "I've already taken steps to protect my accounts," I said. That got their attention immediately. "What do you mean?" Jessica asked sharply. "I mean," I replied calmly, "you no longer have access." Silence. Then you what? Michael snapped. It's done, I said. The transfers are frozen. The permissions are revoked. His face flushed with anger. You had no right to. I had every right, I interrupted. Jessica stepped forward, her composure breaking completely now. Do you realize what you've done? She demanded. Yes, I said. I've stopped you. That hit harder than anything else, because it was final, because it was real. Michael stood up again, this time not pacing, just standing there, tense, rigid. You're destroying this family, he said. I felt something inside me tighten, not from guilt, from recognition, because that was the story he needed to believe. That I was the one breaking things, not the one trying to protect what was already being taken apart. This family was already being destroyed, I said quietly. You just didn't think I would notice. Lily took a small step forward. Dad, she whispered. Michael didn't look at her, didn't respond, because he couldn't, not without facing what he had done. And that was something he wasn't ready for yet. I turned toward her instead. It's okay, I said gently. She shook her head. No, it's not. Her voice was small, but honest, and in that moment, she was the only one in the room telling the truth without hesitation. I looked back at Michael and Jessica, at the two people who had made choices that couldn't be undone. And I realized something important. This wasn't just about stopping them, it was about what came after. Because actions like this, they don't disappear. They have consequences, real ones. I'm giving you a chance, I said slowly. They both looked at me. A chance to tell the truth. I continued, fully, honestly, without excuses. Michael's expression hardened again. And if we don't? He asked. I held his gaze, then answered calmly. Then I will. The meaning was clear, legal, public, final. Jessica's face drained of color. Michael's fists clenched at his sides. Because now, they understood. This wasn't just a family disagreement anymore. This was something much bigger. Something they couldn't control. Something that would follow them if they didn't stop. And for the first time since this all began, they were the ones feeling it. Fear. After that moment, something inside the house shifted. Not physically, nothing you could point to or touch. But the air itself felt different, colder, heavier. Like every word now carried consequences. No one spoke for a while after I said it. Not Michael, not Jessica. Even Lily stayed quiet, her small figure still lingering in the doorway, caught between confusion and something deeper she didn't yet have the language to explain. I let the silence sit. Because sometimes silence does more than words ever could. It forces people to think, to feel, to confront what they've been avoiding. Finally, Jessica broke first. We need to talk about this privately, she said, her voice tight. No, I replied calmly. Her head snapped toward me. This is a family matter, she insisted. And I am family, I said. That stopped her. Because she couldn't argue with it, not without exposing the truth she had been trying to hide, that in her mind, I had already been pushed outside of that circle. Michael exhaled sharply, then looked at Lily. Go to your room, he said. Lily didn't move. I said, go to your room, he repeated firmer this time. She hesitated, then slowly turned and walked away, but not before glancing back at me, her eyes searching, uncertain. That look stayed with me longer than anything else in that moment, because she was the only one still trying to understand instead of defend. Once she was gone, the tension in the room snapped back into place. Michael turned to me, his tone lower now, more controlled. "What exactly are you planning to do?" he asked. There it was again. Not if I would act, but how. Because deep down, he knew. I walked over to the chair and sat down slowly, folding my hands together. "I'm giving you both a chance," I said. Jessica let out a small, incredulous laugh. "A chance," she repeated. "Yes." Michael crossed his arms. "And what does that look like?" "It looks like honesty," I said. "Complete honesty. Everything you've done. Everything you've planned." And then what Jessica asked. "Then we decide what happens next." She shook her head. "That's not how this works." "No," I said quietly. "It is, because for the first time, it actually was." Michael stepped closer, his voice tightening. "You think you can just walk into a bank, make a few calls, and suddenly you're in control again?" I met his gaze. "I don't think," I said. "I know." That silence again, but this time, it felt different, sharper, because now he could feel it too. The shift, the loss of control. "You don't understand how far this has already gone," he said. There was something in his voice now, not just frustration. Something closer to warning. "Then, help me understand," I replied. He hesitated. Jessica stepped in quickly. "Michael, don't," she said. He looked at her, then back at me. And for a moment, I saw something break. Not completely, but enough. "We've already moved part of the funds," he said. Jessica closed her eyes briefly, like she knew he had just crossed a line. "How much?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. "Michael?" I said again, more firmly. "A lot," he admitted. The word hit harder than a number, because a lot meant intentional. It meant planned. It meant this wasn't just a mistake that could be easily undone. "And the house?" I asked. He looked away. That was answer enough. My chest tightened, but I didn't let it show. Because this wasn't the moment for emotion. This was the moment for clarity. "For how long?" I asked. "How long what?" "How long have you been planning this?" He hesitated. "Then months." Jessica stepped back slightly, her face pale. Because now, there was no going back, no rewriting the story, no softening the truth. Months. That meant every dinner, every conversation, every moment of kindness had been layered over something else, something hidden, something deliberate. I nodded slowly. "Thank you for telling me," I said. The words surprised him. "You're not angry?" he asked. I paused, because the truth was, I was, but anger wasn't what I needed right now. "I'm past that," I said quietly. And I was, because anger fades. But decisions, they stay. Jessica shook her head again. "This is getting out of control," she said. "We need to think about what's best moving forward." "We already did that," I replied. Yes. I reached into my purse and pulled out a small envelope. Their eyes followed the movement instantly. "What's that?" Michael asked. "Something you should see," I said. I placed it on the table between us. Slowly, deliberately. Jessica stepped forward first, picking it up with cautious fingers. She opened it, and as she read, her expression changed. Color draining, eyes widening, hands tightening. "What is it?" Michael asked. She didn't answer. Just handed it to him. He read it, then looked up at me. "What is this?" he demanded. "It's a notice," I said calmly. "Of what?" "Of legal representation." The room went completely still, because now they understood. This wasn't just a conversation anymore. This wasn't just something they could argue their way out of. This had moved beyond them, beyond the house, beyond control. "You hired a lawyer?" Jessica asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes." Michael's face hardened again. "You're really doing this?" I held his gaze. "You already did," I said. And that was the truth, because the moment they made their choices, this outcome had already begun. They just didn't realize it yet. That night, no one slept. You can always tell when a house has crossed a line it can't uncross. The silence isn't peaceful anymore. It's tense. Watching, listening, waiting for the next move. I stayed in my room, the door closed, the lights dim. Not out of fear, but out of necessity. Because now, everything mattered. Every word, every step, every decision. Across the hall, I could hear faint voices, Michael and Jessica, arguing, low at first, then sharper, more desperate. "You told her too much," Jessica hissed. "I didn't have a choice," Michael shot back. She already knew. She didn't know everything, she knew enough. Their voices rose and fell like waves crashing against something already broken. I sat on the edge of my bed, listening not out of curiosity, but out of awareness. Because this was the part people don't see. The unraveling. The moment when a plan falls apart and the people behind it turn on each other. "We could have fixed this," Jessica said, her voice tight. "If you had just stayed calm." "Calm," Michael laughed bitterly. "She froze the accounts, Jessica. She went to the bank. She hired a lawyer. This isn't something we can just fix." There was a pause, a long one. Then Jessica spoke again, quieter this time. "We still have options." That made my chest tighten slightly. Options. That word again. Always planning, always calculating. "What kind of options?" Michael asked. "If we move quickly," she said, "we can still." I couldn't hear the rest. But I didn't need to, because I understood something important in that moment. They weren't done. Not yet. And that meant neither was I. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise. Not because I couldn't sleep, but because I needed to act. Timing matters. And right now, timing was everything. I dressed quietly, choosing something simple but deliberate. Nothing that suggested fear. Nothing that suggested weakness. Because perception, it matters more than people think. When I stepped into the kitchen, Jessica was already there. Of course she was. Coffee steaming in her mug, eyes sharp, watching. "You're up early," she said. "So are you," I replied. We stood there for a moment, facing each other across the counter. No pretense now. No polite smiles. Just two people who understood exactly what the other was capable of. "We need to talk," she said. I tilted my head slightly. "About what?" About what happens next. I walked over slowly, pouring myself a cup of coffee. All right, I said. Let's talk. She took a breath, as if preparing herself. Michael didn't handle that well last night, she said. I almost smiled. That's one way to put it. But emotions were high, she continued. People say things they don't mean. I don't think that's what happened, I said calmly. Her jaw tightened slightly. Then what do you think happened? I think the truth came out, I replied. Silence. Then, you're going to regret this, she said. The words were quiet, but heavy, not emotional, not reactive, calculated, a warning. I met her gaze. Am I asked. She stepped closer. You think you're in control right now? She said. But you're not seeing the full picture. There is no picture you can show me that justifies what you've done, I replied. Her expression changed. Not dramatically, just enough. The mask slipping. Just a little. You've always underestimated me, she said. The statement surprised me, because it wasn't defensive. It was personal. I trusted you, I said. That's not the same thing. There it was, the truth beneath everything. This had never been about misunderstanding. It had been about intention. Michael walked in, then his face drawn, his eyes tired. He looked between us, immediately sensing the tension. What's going on? He asked. We're discussing consequences, Jessica said. He flinched slightly at that word. Consequences. Because now, it was real. I turned toward him. I'm meeting with my lawyer today, I said. His reaction was immediate. You don't need to do that, he said quickly. I do, I replied. We can work this out, he insisted. I shook my head slowly. That time has passed. Jessica crossed her arms. So that's it, she asked. You're just going to turn this into a legal battle? No, I said. I'm going to protect myself. Michael ran a hand over his face, frustration spilling through every movement. This is insane, he muttered. No, I said again. It's necessary. Because it was. Because once trust is broken at that level, there is no conversation that fixes it. Only action. Only accountability. Lily appeared again, standing quietly near the hallway. She didn't say anything this time, just watched. And something about that made everything feel heavier, because she was seeing all of this, learning from it, whether we wanted her to or not. I walked over to her slowly. You're going to school today? I asked gently. She nodded. Good, I said softly. Focus on that. Let the adults handle this. She looked up at me. But you're upset, she said. I paused, then smiled faintly. I'm strong, I said. She studied my face for a moment, then nodded. Because children, they understand strength when they see it, even if they don't fully understand why it's needed. As she left, I turned back toward Michael and Jessica. This isn't about punishment, I said. It's about truth. Michael didn't respond. Jessica didn't argue. Because deep down, they knew the next phase had begun. And this time, there was no hiding from it. The day everything came to light didn't feel dramatic at first. There was no shouting when it began, no sudden confrontation, no explosion, just a quiet knock at the door. I was the one who opened it. And when I did, I saw Daniel Brooks standing there calm and composed, a leather folder tucked under his arm. Mrs. Bennett, he said politely. Are you ready? I nodded. Yes. Behind me, I could already feel the shift. Michael and Jessica had heard the door. They knew. And this time, there was no pretending they didn't. Who is that? Michael called from the living room. I stepped aside. Come in, I said to Daniel. He entered without hesitation, his presence filling the room in a way that immediately changed the balance of power. Not loud, not aggressive, just certain. Michael stepped into view, his expression tightening the moment he saw him. What is this? He demanded. Daniel didn't answer right away. He simply set his folder down on the table, then turned to face them. My name is Daniel Brooks, he said evenly. I represent Sylvia Bennett. The words landed like a final line drawn in the sand. Jessica stood up slowly. This is unnecessary, she said quickly. We can handle this as a family. Daniel gave a small professional smile. That option has already been exhausted. Silence, heavy, unavoidable, because deep down, they knew it was true. Michael stepped forward, his voice rising. You have no right to bring a lawyer into our home. Daniel didn't react, didn't raise his voice, didn't match the emotion. This is Mrs. Bennett's residence, he said calmly, and I am here at her request. That stopped Michael mid-sentence, because now, even the foundation of his argument had been taken away. I walked over slowly and stood beside Daniel. Not behind him, not hidden, beside him, because this wasn't about hiding anymore. This was about standing firm. I asked him to come, I said. Michael stared at me. You're serious, he said. I've never been more serious in my life. Jessica crossed her arms, trying to regain control. What exactly do you think you're going to prove? She asked. Daniel opened the folder, then calmly placed several documents on the table. These, he said, are copies of financial transactions authorization changes and property documents associated with Mrs. Bennett. Michael didn't move. Jessica didn't speak. But I saw it. The recognition, the fear. Because they knew exactly what those papers were. You've been forging signatures, Daniel continued. Transferring funds without consent, attempting to reassign property ownership under false pretenses. Each word was precise, measured, impossible to twist. That's not true, Jessica said immediately, but her voice lacked conviction. Daniel didn't argue. He simply slid one document forward. Is this your handwriting? He asked. Jessica looked at it, and for a brief second, she hesitated. That was all it took, because hesitation is louder than denial. Michael stepped in. This is being taken out of context, he said quickly. We were managing things for her. Without her knowledge? Daniel asked. Michael's mouth opened, then closed, because there was no answer that didn't sound exactly like what it was. Wrong, Daniel continued. There is also documentation indicating intent to relocate Mrs. Bennett into assisted living without her consent. That hit differently, because it wasn't just financial. It was personal. It was control over a life, over freedom. Jessica stepped back slightly, her composure cracking. That's not how it was supposed to happen, she said. The same line, the same excuse. But here, it didn't hold. Intent matters, Daniel replied, and so does action. The room felt smaller now, tighter. Because the truth wasn't just spoken anymore. It was documented, verified, real. Michael ran a hand over his face, his frustration turning into something heavier. What do you want? He asked again. But this time, it wasn't a challenge. It was resignation. I stepped forward. "I want everything returned," I said. "All access removed, all transfers reversed, every document corrected." Jessica shook her head. "That's not possible," she said. Daniel looked at her. "It is," he said, "and it will be." Michael let out a sharp breath. "And if we don't?" Daniel didn't hesitate. "Then we proceed legally." There it was. Clear, final, unavoidable. No more gray areas, no more hidden intentions. Just consequence. Jessica's voice dropped to a whisper. "You're really going to do this to your own family?" I looked at her, and for the first time, I didn't feel anger. I felt clarity. "You already did this to me," I said. The silence that followed was different. Not tense, not explosive, just empty. Because everything that needed to be said had been said. Lily stood at the edge of the hallway again, watching quietly. She didn't cry, didn't speak, just observed. And in that moment, I realized something important. This wasn't just about ending something. It was about showing her what standing up for yourself looks like. Michael finally sat down, his shoulders slumping. "What do we have to do?" he asked. Daniel glanced at me. I nodded. Then he spoke. "You cooperate," he said, "fully." Jessica closed her eyes. Because now, there was no more control left to hold on to. Only consequence. Only truth. Only the reality of what they had done. And for the first time since this all began, justice wasn't just coming. It had arrived. The aftermath didn't come all at once. It came in layers, slow, heavy, unavoidable. At first, there was resistance. Of course there was. Michael tried to argue, to delay, to negotiate terms that didn't exist. "This doesn't have to go any further," he said the next day, pacing again. His voice strained. "We can fix this without dragging everything through the system." But Daniel had already made it clear. "There is no quiet resolution after fraud," he had said. And for the first time in my life, I didn't try to soften that truth. Jessica, on the other hand, changed her approach entirely. She didn't argue, didn't raise her voice. Instead, she became careful, quiet, strategic. She stopped confronting me directly and began focusing on what she thought she could still control. But the problem was, there wasn't much left. The accounts were frozen. The documents were flagged. The legal process had already begun. And once that kind of process starts, it doesn't stop because someone asks it to. It continues, relentlessly. Within days, things began to unravel. Michael received formal notices. Jessica did too. Requests for documentation, clarifications, statements, each one pulling at the threads they had tried so carefully to weave together. And with every response they gave, more of the truth came out. Not just what they had done, but how they had done it. The timeline, the intent, the planning. I watched it happen from a distance, not emotionally detached, but grounded, because there's a difference between reacting to pain and understanding it. And now I understood. Lily stayed mostly quiet during those days, but she watched everything, more than either of her parents realized. One evening, she came into my room again, just like she used to. Only this time, she didn't bring a book. She just sat down beside me. "Grandma," she said softly, Are you going to leave? The question caught me off guard. Not because I hadn't thought about it, but because she had. I don't know yet, I said, honestly. She nodded slowly. I heard Mom and Dad talking, she added. Of course she had. Children always hear more than we think. They said things are falling apart. I took a breath. Sometimes things fall apart, I said gently so the truth can come out. She looked up at me. Is that what's happening? Yes, I said. She was quiet for a moment. Then, they shouldn't have done that to you. The simplicity of it, the clarity. It broke something in me I didn't realize I was still holding together. Thank you, I whispered. She leaned her head against my shoulder, and for a moment, everything else faded. Because no matter what had happened, that connection was still real, still honest, still unbroken. Days later, the final decisions began to take shape. Michael and Jessica had no choice but to comply. The evidence was too clear, the consequences too real. The house was returned to my name. Fully. Legally. Irrevocably. The accounts were restored. The transfers reversed where possible. The rest would take time and legal follow-through. But the control, that was already back in my hands. The hardest part wasn't the legal process. It wasn't the paperwork. It wasn't even the betrayal. It was what came after. The silence. The emptiness. The realization that something fundamental had been broken. Not just trust, but relationship. Michael didn't speak to me much anymore. When he did, it was short, controlled, guarded. Jessica avoided me almost entirely, moving through the house like I wasn't there. Like I had become something inconvenient, uncomfortable. And maybe, in a way I had, because I was no longer the version of myself they had planned for. The one who didn't question, didn't notice, didn't fight back. I was something else now, something they hadn't expected, someone who saw clearly, someone who acted, someone who refused to be erased. The day they left wasn't dramatic. There was no shouting, no final confrontation, just quiet movement, boxes, suitcases, doors opening and closing. I stood in the hallway as they carried things out, not stopping them, not helping, just witnessing, because this was the consequence. Not something I had created, something they had set in motion. Michael paused at the door before leaving. For a moment, it looked like he might say something. Apologize. Explain. But he didn't. He just nodded once, then walked out. Jessica didn't look at me at all. The door closed behind them. And just like that, the house was quiet again. But this time, it felt different. Not empty, not lonely, just still. Lily stayed, at least for now. She stood beside me in the hallway, watching the door long after it had closed. Is it over? She asked softly. I looked at her, then around the house, at the walls, the space, the life I had built. It's not the end, I said. It's a new beginning. And for the first time since this all began, I meant it. Healing doesn't happen all at once. It doesn't arrive like a sudden wave that washes everything clean. It comes slowly, in quiet moments, in small decisions, in the space you rebuild after something has been taken apart. The house felt different now. Not just because Michael and Jessica were gone, but because I had reclaimed it, not just legally, but emotionally. For weeks, I moved through each room carefully, almost as if I were reintroducing myself to a life I had once known so well. The kitchen, the living room, the hallway where that locked door once stood as a symbol of everything hidden from me. I removed the lock, not dramatically, not as a statement, just quietly. Because I didn't want anything in my home that represented secrecy again. I opened the door and cleared the room myself, file by file, paper by paper, not out of anger, but closure, because that space no longer held power over me. It was just a room again, and that mattered. Lily stayed with me during that time. At first it felt temporary, like she was caught between two places, two realities. But over time, something changed. She began to settle, to relax, to laugh again. One afternoon, she sat at the kitchen table doing homework while I made tea. "Grandma," she said suddenly, "do you ever feel different now?" I smiled slightly. "All the time." She looked up. "Is that a bad thing?" I shook my head. "No," I said. "It's what happens when you learn something important." She thought about that for a moment. "Like what I set the kettle down and turned toward her." "Like knowing your worth," I said. She nodded slowly, as if she understood more than I expected. And maybe she did, because sometimes the hardest lessons are also the clearest. The legal process continued for a while. Not dramatic, not explosive, just steady, measured, final. Michael and Jessica faced consequences, real ones, not just within the family, but beyond it. And while I didn't take pleasure in that, I didn't regret it either. Because accountability isn't cruelty, it's necessary. Michael tried to reach out once, a phone call, late at night. I let it ring, not out of spite, but because I wasn't ready. And maybe neither was he. Some relationships don't end with a single moment. They fade. They change. They become something else entirely. And that's okay. Because not everything is meant to return to what it was. Some things are meant to become something new. Months passed, and slowly, life began to feel steady again. Not perfect, but real. I started doing things I hadn't done in years. Walking in the mornings, visiting old friends, even redecorating parts of the house, small changes that made it feel like mine again. Completely mine. One evening, Lily and I sat on the porch, watching the sun set. The sky was painted in soft shades of gold and pink, the kind of quiet beauty that doesn't ask for attention, but rewards you when you notice it. "It's peaceful," she said. "Yes," I replied. "Do you think it'll stay like this?" I looked out at the horizon, then back at her. "Peace isn't something that just stays," I said. "It's something you choose, every day." She leaned her head against my shoulder, just like she used to. And in that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not relief, not victory, something deeper, wholeness. Because I hadn't just protected what was mine. I had protected who I was. And that matters more than anything. I looked around the house one last time that night before turning off the lights. No locked doors, no secrets, no fear, just space, just truth, just a life I had fought to keep. And as I closed my bedroom door, I realized something I wished I had understood sooner. Family isn't defined by blood alone. It's defined by respect. by honesty, by the way people choose to treat you when they think you're not paying attention. And sometimes, the most important door you open is the one that shows you exactly who people really are. After everything Sylvia went through, one truth becomes clear. Trust is not something we give blindly. It's something that must be protected even within family. Love without respect can turn into control, and silence can become a tool for harm. But no matter your age, no matter your situation, it is never too late to stand up for yourself. Strength doesn't always look loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's quiet, patient, and unwavering. If this story touched you in any way, I'd really love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever had a moment where you had to stand up for yourself, even against people close to you? Share your story in the comments, and don't forget to tell me where you're watching from and what time it is. I always read those. If you want more stories about truth, resilience, and unexpected strength, make sure to like and subscribe.